today's office is more important than ever before because it forms the culture. It's an extension of the ownership, of the management of the company, of the leadership of the company.
Celebrating a century of success, where we've been, where we're going, and living the legacy focused on innovation, relationships, and doing the right thing. This is the More Than a Chair podcast by Business Furniture.
Welcome to the Business Furniture More Than a Chair podcast. I'm Gerry Dick, really excited to be part of this special series celebrating the 100-year anniversary of Business Furniture. You know, Business Furniture, founded in 1922, it became the first steel case office furniture dealer in the world. And I'm really honored to be the host of this podcast as we dive into the history of a century of success for Business Furniture. Plus, throughout this series, we'll be talking with past and current Business Furniture clients to discover how space shapes our behaviors. Behaviors create culture, and business culture drives results. Today, we are kicking off the series with Business Furniture Chairman Emeritus Dick Oakes, who purchased Business Furniture in 1987. And Dick, it is always a real treat to be with you. Thanks for being on the podcast.
I'm excited too.
Yeah, 100 years. I mean, that is an amazing accomplishment. From your perspective, as someone who's really shaped the company, what does it mean to be part of a business that has now been in Indiana in business for 100 years?
Well, obviously, I'm very proud and glad to be part of it this past 35 years. It's an amazing place. It was an amazing place when I got here 35 years ago, but to look at it today, it's really exciting.
Yeah, well, think about this. Business Furniture was the first steel case dealer. And as I understand it, the deal was basically sealed with a promise and a handshake. What do you remember about that?
Well, it was actually it was a bottle of bourbon and a handshake.
Even better.
That's even better.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah, it happened at Union Station.
Really?
Of one of the three owners of Steelcase at the time in 1922, and Mr. C.S. Ober, who was the founder of Business Furniture, met at Union Station and as you said, kind of sealed the deal over a little bit of bourbon.
Oh, that's outstanding. That is outstanding. You were in the furniture business at the time you bought Business Furniture. You were at Steelcase, right?
I was at Steelcase, yes.
And so you had been an executive in the business furniture industry for a number of years, but prior to that, and I think this is interesting, you were a golf pro.
I was a failed golf pro, yes.
Yeah. Now, come on. Well, tell us that story. How did you go from being a golf pro? So you had aspirations, I assume, of making golf your career. How'd you end up in the business furniture business?
I did. I went to college in Texas to play golf. Grew up in Illinois. Went to college in Texas to play golf, and then sort of got bored and quit college thinking I was good enough to make the tour. And I spent a couple of, almost like misspent youth. but it was my dream, and I tried it for a couple of years and ended up in Southern California at a kind of a ritzy country club, giving golf lessons.
Yeah.
Which was not my dream job, but at least it was a job. And from there, I got a job in New York, working for AT&T. Okay. AT&T was moving their headquarters out of Manhattan into New Jersey, and they needed some folks to take the inventory. There were 22,000 people that worked in their headquarters in Lower Manhattan. Yeah. And they needed some folks to take the furniture inventory, and that was my first entry-level job into the industry.
That got you into the industry. You wound up in Michigan, right?
I eventually ended up at Steelcase, who at that time, 1970-ish, was just coming over the hump of being the industry leader, and I joined them in Kansas City, and then in St. Louis, and then in San Francisco, and then in Dallas, and eventually at their headquarters in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And that's how I got here. I had decided to leave the company. Really, I had worked with dealers for almost 20 years all over the western 26 states, and I had this sort of burning desire to be a business owner. I made a short list of of markets and companies that I was interested in buying. I went to the chairman of Steelcase, and he agreed to co-sign my note, or I wouldn't have been able to do it. Bob Pugh, and Bob co-signed my note, and I was able to buy the Ober's business. So it's special to me, being an ex-Steelcase guy, that it's that first Steelcase dealer. It's got a lot of history, and a lot of wonderful people have worked here way before I got here. So I was able to buy a great company, and here it is 35 years later.
Business Furniture, a family company. And the Ober family, that Ober name, very iconic in Indianapolis. You bought it from the Ober family, very much a family-owned business. What do you remember about purchasing the company?
Well, Mr. Ober, C.S. Ober, was still not active in the business, but he was a real entrepreneur, a real Hoosier entrepreneur. He was from Fort Wayne, came to Indianapolis, started Business Furniture in 22. He also started a company, Stationers, what many people may remember.
Sure, yeah.
They were the largest office supply company in Indiana. So he owned the biggest furniture company in Indiana and the biggest office supply company. He ran for mayor, committed to the city of Indianapolis. He ran for mayor in the early 1950s. He was a primary fundraiser for the first convention bureau. He raised money privately to fund the first convention bureau. He was on the Visitors and Convention Bureau board of directors. I think he was corporate secretary up until he died at 94. So a great legacy of civic involvement and leadership.
So you were buying a high-profile company, certainly. It's a high-profile location today. What was it like?
Well, it was nothing like it is today. In the early 80s, I'd been here one time for the race, and I don't think I saw anything other than what was on 16th Street, like many people go to the race for the first time. Downtown was kind of sleepy in those days. It was certainly before Circle Center Mall. It was before the rebirth of downtown with Mayor Hudnut and the great mayors that we've had over the years that have kick-started Indianapolis to get a head start of these Rust Belt cities in the Midwest. Nothing like it is today, but it was certainly an iconic city, even though it might have been a little sleepy at the time.
Right. You got in right on the front end of that,
I did.
That momentum.
I sure did.
In a lot of ways. And you benefited, as many people have, I think, in this community, from mentors and people who really took an interest in you and your future. How important was that mentorship?
Well, it was probably the most important thing. As I said, I'd never been to Indianapolis, and I've been so fortunate in my life. I had two great mentors at Steelcase that sort of pushed me and helped me along. And I got here, and I met, I can think of two people that were just instrumental in my development and my understanding of what it took to be successful in Indianapolis. One was Howard S. Wilcox.
Howdy Wilcox, right.
Howdy was a great friend of mine, and the other one was Jim Kittle Sr. Both of those gentlemen had just retired in the late 1980s and were looking for something to do. And I gave them an office in the Business Furniture building at 101 South Pennsylvania. They had both sold their companies. Jim had turned Kittles over to his two sons, and Howdy had sold his PR agency. And so I gave him an office and a secretary, and I said, I won't even charge you for that if you'll spend a day with me a month educating me about Indianapolis. I said, at the present time, I've just got a street map in my car, but I don't know how this city works or who's on first or anything. And in the next couple of years, they guided me through what the city was all about, and really sponsored me in clubs and organizations, and gave me advice and counsel and pointed me in the right direction. So it was just the most important thing to me.
That is so smart that you thought to do that, especially in a community, a city like Indianapolis, which I always refer to as a big little city. Relationships are very important. So you were able to really benefit from mentorship and leadership in the community.
I think back on it now, And some of the questions that I ask them, they're so silly. Today, I remember asking Mr. Kittle, called him one morning, and I said, Mr. Kittle, do you have a minute? And he said, certainly, for you, I have a minute. And I said, well, we're trying to do business with St. Vincent's Hospital. And I said, we've tried and with no success, not a little success. We haven't had any.
Yeah.
And he said, well, have you given them any money? And I said, giving them any money? No, I'm trying to sell them office furniture. And he said, well, give them some money. I said, I don't have any money to give them. He said, good night, Dick. Then make a pledge. Make a pledge.
Yeah.
And I said, how much? But, here it is all these years later, and you walk into St. Vincent's Hospital on 86th Street, and there's that great big Mr. Kittle standing there in bronze. And I think of myself, I didn't even know he was on the board of directors at the time.
You didn't know that?
No, I did not know it. But that's the silly kind of stuff that I would ask Howdy and Jim. They were so nice to me and just gave me great direction.
How do you remember the business developing and growing from that downtown location in the early years? How was business?
It was sort of like the city. The history of business furniture is really the history of Indianapolis. I mean, business furniture made it through the Depression, had to have great leadership from Mr. Ober, made it through World War II. Then that period from the 50s, 60s, up until the early 1970s, it just sort of bumped along. No big growth spurts or anything like that. Then as the city began to develop, guess what? Business furniture developed along with it. So, so that's the story I have to tell about the success of our company is really the success of Indianapolis. And I think that's what I'm most proud of. Is the fact that we've had a little part to play of this 100 years of our history in the development of the city. But as a result of the development of the city, we've become such a great company.
So you moved from your downtown location to a new location. Talk about that decision, where you went, and what that role played in the development of the company.
Well, it wasn't an easy one because we had, as you said, we had the building at 101 South Pennsylvania was the Business Furniture Building, a gigantic sign, 5-story sign that says Business Furniture.
Right.
Now it says Steak and Shake, I believe.
It is. Yep, that's right. That's right.
It was a difficult decision to move simply because we were such a part of downtown. I, at the time, felt like that we were not just an Indianapolis company because our reach was a sort of a Hoosier reach. It was the whole state of Indiana. And I felt like that we needed more space. Our employees, we had people from Greenwood and Lebanon and the north side, the south side, the west side, the east side. So we decided to build a building, picked up and left, and grew, I think, 20% that year.
Wow!
So it
was a good move.
It was a good move, and,
Right.
and we probably hit the economy at a good time. And we've moved again since then.
Yep.
And we've expanded into Ohio. We have a new venture called Mindset, a little studio that we've put in Fishers. So we continue to broaden our reach.
Well, as the company has evolved, Business Furniture is now owned by your wife and daughter, and importantly, an official woman-owned business reaching WBE status just, I think, last year.
That's right.
Talk about, as you look at that designation, that leadership, and what it means for the future of the company.
I talked about my Steelcase years working with dealers over the period of time, and I saw many companies, small companies, they didn't have an exit plan. There was not a succession plan for the owner, for the management of the company. And one of the most important things to me when I got here, because I didn't get here until I was 45 years old, was to think, what can I do now to prepare for exiting the business? And if I exit, how does the company continue? Because this is the sort of company, we think of ourselves as more important than just selling furniture. Our clients are so much a part of us, and we're a part of them. And so we put together a strategy, and I was just fortunate enough. My wife, Mary Beth, and my daughter, Suzanne, one of them came in 92 and one of them came in 94. And here they are today. They're also business partners. So the next generation is already there and in place and experienced. It's not like I have to go out and search a buyer or to find new management to bring in. It's in place and it's been there, experienced and successful. So if there's a legacy, my legacy is I think that's it. That they are doing things today that we wouldn't have thought about doing just a few years ago.
Yeah, you're reflective, really, of the evolution of the industry, but also of business furniture. You know, the title of this podcast is More Than a Chair. You have seen such a dramatic change in corporate workplace. You know, how the way people work, all those things. And I know business furniture is kind of on that cutting edge of that. Talk about the change.
From the 20s through the 1960s, the industry was pretty dull. There were metal desks and there were wood desks and there were various colors, and that was about the extent of the creativity. But also, there wasn't any technology in the office either. Maybe there was an electric typewriter, or there might have been a telephone, but on the telephone it had a cord on it, and not everybody in the office had a telephone. If that's the beginning, then our industry has changed as much as technology has changed in the office. Today's office is more important than ever before because it forms the culture. It's an extension of the ownership, of the management of the company, of the leadership of the company. It's not like they're just satisfied in going to an office that is staid. It's constantly changing and evolving. And the industry has matured and grown up in recognition of the change that companies like Apple have brought into the workplace. And there's many partnerships between technology companies and office furniture manufacturers working together to make the office a better place, fun place.
Tom Linebarger, the CEO at Cummins, told me one time, he said, we're not an engine company, we're a technology company.
Right.
And in some respects, as I listen to you, business furniture is an office furniture company, but really also a technology company in a lot of ways.
Well, it's interesting to me that I had the opportunity to hire a guy in Houston, Texas, that you've met, Gary. His name is Jim Hackett. Jim worked for me for a number of years in the Southwest and then went on to become president and CEO of Steelcase. He retired in his middle 50s, went on the board of the Ford Motor Company, was on their board a couple of years, and Bill Ford went to him and asked him if he would consider being president and CEO of Ford, which he did. Jim was president and CEO of Ford. And Jim, with that experience of 25 years with Steelcase, he didn't think of himself as a furniture guy at Steelcase. And he certainly didn't think of himself as a car guy at Ford. He thought that he was in the technology business. And he also thought he was in the people business. And I think that says it all right there. Whatever your business is, people better be a great big part of it with employees, clients, and customers. We're all in the people business.
Do you think that people connection, that focus on people is lost a little bit in business, not just in the office furniture business, but just in business in general, that relationship?
Well, I think it's a little bit lost right now due to COVID. I think this whole bit of not being in the office, I think that is damaging to whatever kind of culture a company has or is trying to develop. That it's difficult to develop that if you can't have a hands-on, face-to-face, in-person relationship with the people that you work with. The people, it's kind of like a long-distance marriage over the telephone. I just, it's beyond me how that works, and the whole thing is successful as Zoom is. It's hard for that being the only type of communication that you have with employees or customers or clients. And so I think some of it's lost, but I think it's more important today than probably ever before, simply because things move so fast.
Sure. As you look at the future of the industry and the future of work, if you will? Because I know early in the pandemic, you had all these prognosticators saying, people are never going to go back to the office. And then, I hear CEOs all the time saying, we've got to get back to the office at some level, have that personal interaction. How do you see the world of work, if you will, being impacted going forward once we're largely out of this whole COVID situation?
Everybody's an expert on this subject.
Yeah, right.
I don't think we're going to see that day where it's a 40 or 45-hour work week at the office. And I think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. So I look at that as a good thing. I noticed that in New York, Citibank announced they're coming back to work. Citibank is a very large employer in Lower Manhattan, and they're coming back to the office. I think we're going to see an awful lot of that as springtime rolls around and then summer. But I doubt seriously whether it's going to be this 5 days a week, 40 hours a day thing.
Yeah.
And so therefore that puts some pressure on facilities people, the architectural and design community, the furniture industry, to be able to provide solutions and the sort of work environment that supports business today rather than the office of yesterday. Mm-hmm. And that's what most companies have been utilizing, the office of yesterday.
Yeah.
And simply put, employees are not happy with that. Mm-hmm. I think a change is coming. It's already started, and it really has to do with making the workplace a little more with a residential feel, a little bit like the comfort of your family room, that it's a little more ergonomic and a little more technology.
Fascinating. Dick Business Furniture employees are talking about living the legacy as part of this 100-year celebration this year. As you look at legacy and your thoughts on legacy, what do you want it to be?
Another mentor of mine that I met in my first week in town was Melvin Simon. The Simons were great customers of Business Furniture from the day that he started the company. And I was introduced to him as the young man that just acquired Business Furniture. And Mr. Simon said to me, he said, well, you bought a fine company. Don't screw it up.
Great advice, right?
It was great advice. And then he said something interesting. He said, but if you do, come see me. I'll be glad to help. So that was rather reassuring. But I think that if there's a legacy, I bought a great company, and hopefully I've kind of brought it along to 2021, 2022. And if there's a legacy there, I continued the CS Ober founder's direction, made some improvements to it, was lucky enough to ride the Indianapolis wave of success, and I think our employees and Mary Beth and Suzanne are able to take that to the future.
Well, Dick, it's been a real pleasure, a real treat to be with you. As always, thank you for your leadership in the community and obviously with the company as well. And again, congratulations on an amazing milestone, 100 years in business at Business Furniture. And thank you for joining us on this first edition of the More Than a Chair podcast. It's a special series celebrating the 100-year anniversary of Business Furniture. I'm Gerry Dick. We'll see you next time.